I was not taken into service, as you know. My next recollection would be I was working part-time at a service station up in Lawrence Township, near Lawrenceville, New Jersey. It's Smitty's. And it was a Sunoco service station. We had a grocery store and an ice cream fountain. It was sort of a neighborhood store. And I was working there on Sunday, December the 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. I remember that now, and I shall remember it till the day I die. Many of the young fellows in the neighborhood, including my brother, used to come home from church. Our business was between a Catholic church and a Presbyterian church, and everybody would congregate in the store after the church. And I can still remember, along with my brother and my friends, many of them went down the next day and enlisted. And some enlisted in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force. My brother enlisted in the Air Force. I was too young at the time. But then I knew my grandfather was wrong, because everybody knew we were in for it, and all our lives were subject to change from that day on. And unfortunately, some of my acquaintances and close friends didn't come back. And my closest friend, that was Sonny Fell, he was in numerous island invasions in the South Pacific. He was wounded twice. He had several battle awards given to him and ribbons. And when he was discharged in '45, he came home and died from his wounds practically 6 months later. So my recollection of the war is as a civilian and not as somebody who was in service. And my stories would be altogether different than when anybody was in service. When I came from high school, I went to work for the New Jersey Highway Department. But though I liked it there, I felt I should, though I couldn't be taken into service, I felt I should do something. So I went to work for Eastern Aircraft. Eastern Aircraft was up in West Trenton, New Jersey. It was formerly the Turnstedt division for the General Motors Corporation, and they made hardware, particularly like door handles and hinges and things of that nature for General Motors products. Practically a week after Pearl Harbor, that plant was closed down, was shortly taken over and managed by Grumman Aircraft Corporation out of New York. And within 1 year from the time they shut General Motors down and opened up Eastern Aircraft, the first torpedo bomber came off the assembly line. I think I was amazed as a young fella at the speed of turning a manufacturing plant that made automobile parts within a year, turning out a torpedo bomber. I remember we had the TBM-1, which was the first torpedo bomber manufactured, and they discovered that it was very vulnerable from underneath, and the Japanese and the Germans soon learned if they came in under that plane, they could shoot it down. So the plant was closed down for 3 days, I forget the year, and we went from the TBM-1 to the TBM-3. And the TBM-3 had a turret, gun turret, put on the bottom of the plane. And from then on, the fortunes of that airplane were quite high, and they sunk many a Japanese ship. It was one of the favorite planes used by the British. course, living through the Second World War as a civilian was nowhere near as severe as what our armed forces was going through. But your life changed. There was gas rationing, there was food rationing. Practically everything you did was ration in one form or another. Knowledge of Pearl Harbor was, of course, going back to December the 7th, 1941. Your grandmother had a close friend of hers through a school that was on the Arizona, and when that sunk, and he's one that his body was never recovered, and his remains are still on the Arizona. And many years later, probably around 1974, your grandmother and I were able to visit Hawaii, and we did go on the Arizona Memorial, and your grandmother was able to pick out the name of her friend that was on the Arizona and went down with it, that was quite moving. I'll tell you one other story. I had a close friend, I don't want to mention his name. He was in the Air Force, and he came home on leave, and he was to be sent overseas. He was a bomber pilot, and B-24s, and he was based in Denver, Colorado, the Air Force base there. He came home on this leave and called me when if I played tennis with him. And we played tennis, and I happened to hit a bad shot, and it hit him in the finger and busted his middle finger on his right hand. When he got back to the base, they told him that they may not let him fly because of this. So he, I guess, made arrangements that he could prove he could fly. He was on one training mission before he was to go over, and he crashed in the Rockies and was killed. Another friend, or an acquaintance, not a friend, acquaintance, was in the Navy, got discharged, Brooklyn Navy Yard, and was coming home, and to save money he was stumming his ride on Route 1 down into Trenton, and got hit by a car and was killed. My brother, as I told you, enlisted the day after Pearl Harbor. He was in, I think it was 47 months old total. And unfortunately or unfortunately, he did not get out of the country. He was just running, they kept sending him from one base to another, and different training, and for it, the war was over, and he never got out of the country. He had been in service 47 months. And there was a lot like that. The Sylvan Fell, that I think he was in the Corps of Army Engineers, and as a boy, I remember him, he had no fear. Where I was rather timid and wouldn't take chances, he would. And I can just imagine him in service taking those same type of chances. And he was wounded, and as I said, he came home and died from his wounds. He had started to keep a diary, and I'll never know what happened to it. That would have been interesting to get a hold of his diary.